Hello, world, and welcome to the In My Footsteps podcast. I am Christopher Setterland, coming to you from the vacation destination known as Cape Cod, Massachusetts, and this is episode 236. Spring is here. It has arrived on Cape Cod, and everywhere else, of course. We may still have to wait a few more weeks for things to bloom, but what you're not going to have to wait for is the blooming of new Gen X nostalgia. It is a loaded show. It's going to kick off with a look back 40 years at the launch of the Legend of Zelda video game series. How many hundreds of hours did I spend playing that game for the original Nintendo? We're going to go way back in the day and have some laughs as we try to think to avoid shrink as we watch an old early 90s A&P Supermarket employee training video. In honor of spring and spring training, we're going to have a brand new top 5 looking back at the most unique, weird, old Major League Baseball parks. And in keeping with that theme, there will be a brand new This Week in History and Time Capsule looking back at the very first ever professional baseball team. All of that is coming up right now on episode 236 of the In My Footsteps podcast. So what are we going to talk about this week? About how I might be a little over-caffeinated to start recording this show. I'm trying to slow myself down, but it's not successful yet. It's possible that as hyped up as I am to start the show, I may have my crash during the recording, so by the end it'll just be me sleeping and I'll just keep it in there recording. But yes, as you heard me speed run through there, it's a loaded show. Spring is here. Well, not technically today if you're listening to when the podcast goes live. Within a few days it's here. Of course, we on Cape Cod in New England, we know that spring doesn't usually arrive until sometime later in April. Until then, we've got this weird winter-spring mix. Low to mid-40s, foggy, drizzle. But of course, after the winter that we've had here in New England, I will take mid-40s and drizzle over temperatures in the teens and high winds and blizzards of snow. Before the caffeine makes me forget my train of thought, I have to thank you all for tuning into the show. I hope you enjoy your weekly dose of Gen X nostalgia. Those of you that follow me on social media, I hope you have enjoyed my alternate logos that I have put together for the podcast. I've been trying to capture the nostalgic vibes from the 60s through the 90s. There are 2 that I've shared so far. When you see them, you immediately know when they're supposed to be from. Avocado color palette, faux wood paneling, weird colored tiled kitchen floors with odd designs. If there are any things like that scream 60s through the 90s that I'm forgetting, you can always send me a message with a photo or something. Say, can you make this into a podcast logo? Before we get into the actual podcast, you know I cannot start off without thanking my Patreon subscribers, my biggest backers. So thank you to Laurie, Mary Lou, Ashley, Kevin, Leo, Marguerite, Neglectoid, Crystal, Matt, Dr. Shrimp Porto Chico. You are my biggest supporters, my biggest backers. I appreciate you having the faith and confidence in me and my quote-unquote skills and talents to actually put your hard-earned money where your mouth is. If you would like to be a supporter on Patreon, you can do so for $5 a month. You get access to bonus podcast episodes like the Hidden Tracks, which are shorter, bite-sized podcasts that take a deep dive into a topic that I've probably talked about on the podcast in the past. There's the remastered Without a Map live streams, which were the live streams I did for the podcast back when I first started this show. And there's the main bonus podcast where I decipher and decode some posts from my old Initial Impressions blog from 2010 to 2014. Also, what went up there recently for Patreon subscribers is the Frozen Cape Cod 2026 retrospective video that I have been talking about. It's 20 minutes, me talking about what it was like with Cape Cod Bay being frozen over with thousands of acres of ice. My stories, my adventures, lots and lots of videos and photos. Eventually that will be up on YouTube for everyone, but I gave the Patreon subscribers a head start. But we can get into more housekeeping as far as the podcast and everything goes at the end of the show. Because right now my brain is a runaway train of caffeine and I've got to keep it locked on its target. So what we're going to do now is we're going to dive into 40 years ago and the release of the original Legend of Zelda game for the NES. So let's ride this wave of nostalgia in episode 236 of the In My Footsteps podcast. There are certain video games that bring me right back to my childhood as soon as I hear their name or see clips of it online. Pitfall, Super Mario Brothers, Metroid, Tetris, and right up there among them is The Legend of Zelda. It is hard to believe that so much time has passed that it's now 40 years since the original Zelda came out for the Nintendo Entertainment System. It was February, so last month, 1986. And the original Legend of Zelda wasn't just another release for Nintendo. It was a major milestone in video gaming that set new standards for design, exploration, storytelling. Zelda introduced ideas that would shape action, adventure, and role-playing games for decades. So let's dive into the original Zelda and its legacy. We couldn't start without the music, come on now. Behind The Legend of Zelda were legendary Nintendo creators Shigeru Miyamoto and Takashi Tezuka. Miyamoto was already being celebrated as he was the creator of both Donkey Kong and Super Mario Bros. He was looking for a game that wasn't focused on linear progression, but more of open exploration and discovery. The development of this game started in late 1984, with the team choosing to go kind of the opposite way of Super Mario Bros., which was more levels, where Zelda would be freedom and player-driven adventure. Immediately, that's one of the things that I remember playing The Legend of Zelda was that you didn't just rush to get to the end of a level. You went to every nook and cranny because there were secrets in different areas that you could find. For me, being 9-10 years old when I first played The Legend of Zelda, it was so much fun to have a game where you got to decide what you did, where you went, how you played the game. In 2026, it's amazing to think of something like saving your game as being a major technological achievement. But in 1986, the vast majority of the games that you played, they were done when you shut off the console. You basically had to sit and play for as many hours as possible if you wanted to try to beat the game. You couldn't just do a quick 20-minute run through and save it and go. It was like, no, you were done. When Zelda debuted for the NES, cartridges included a battery-backed memory system so you could save your adventure and return to it later. This made it possible for you to not have to speedrun games, and also build longer, more intricate game worlds and narratives. It would be like a reward. Come home, finish your homework. Okay, you can play Zelda for an hour. And you would know in that hour you could make progress, and it wasn't just trying to beat your length that you made it in the game from the last time. The Legend of Zelda game centers on a young hero named Link. He is tasked with rescuing Princess Zelda and defeating the evil Ganon. Link looks like an elf, basically. He explores the mythical land of Hyrule, seeking pieces of the Triforce of Wisdom. The Triforce is an artifact that will allow Link the ability to confront and overcome Ganon's forces. From the beginning, The Legend of Zelda is a tale of courage and discovery, and that set the tone not just for the original game, but for the entire franchise. As of 2026, there are more than 30 Legend of Zelda franchise games. Incredibly, for as big and as into the original Zelda and Zelda 2 that I was, those are the only two in the franchise that I've ever played. I know, it ruins my credibility for talking about this. I don't feel bad. Nothing can top the original. Zelda, the original Legend of Zelda, let players explore freely. It was a top-down view, which was different. You were allowed to find tools and items like bombs, the boomerang, and the bow. You could enter dungeons in any order, well, at least to some extent. And as you played, you could develop strategies for survival and progression. This type of game was unprecedented on home consoles at the time, and it laid foundational game designing principles that would be echoed in countless titles in later years, like modern open world and sandbox games. The original Legend of Zelda was launched in Japan on February 21st, 1986 for the Famicom Disk System. It was then released internationally on the Nintendo in August 1987. It became the first Nintendo game to sell more than 1 million copies in the United States, eventually reaching sales of well over 6.5 million copies worldwide. In doing research for this segment of the podcast, mainly talking about the original Legend of Zelda, I watched some clips of gameplay, and the music and the sound effects immediately took me back to 1987, 88. Back then when I was playing, there were no cheat codes. You had to really put in the effort to try to find different things. It would be so much fun to be going through these different worlds and suddenly finding something like a block you could push aside and go down the door. You'd be in some dungeon. There'd be sometimes old men or old women telling you that it was dangerous for you to go alone, but a lot of them, their info, you'd have to pay for it. There would be merchants, fairies, there'd be other characters, some that you had to kill with your sword, others you just had to avoid, or some that would actually be helpful. The Legend of Zelda became more than just a successful game, it was a game changer. Even the cartridge itself was that kind of golden color, which made it immediately stand out from the other ashen gray cartridges for the original Nintendo. Fun fact, one of the original prototypes of The Legend of Zelda, the cartridge wasn't golden, it was kind of more of a mustard yellow. And one of them, in recent years, showed up on eBay and sold for $150,000. It is not known if the gameplay is any better on the mustard yellow one than the golden one, and it's also not known if Dwight Schrute was the one who bought the mustard yellow cartridge to go with his mustard yellow shirt. Another interesting fact that I found out when doing research for this segment is that the original Zelda game and probably part 2 are in the chronology of this series considered two of the last. Meaning that the original Legend of Zelda is not the beginning of the story, it comes to you more at the end. It is said that the Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword, which came out in 2011, for the Nintendo Wii, is considered the beginning of the timeline for Link and the Legend of Zelda. No, I am not going to put them in the order that they're supposed to be chronologically with more than 30 of them. You can do that for yourself. Circling back around, though, the main thing that was unique about The Legend of Zelda was the freedom it gave you as a player. Even the legendary Super Mario Bros. Games, they funneled you in a level. You had to get from A to B, and that was it. Legend of Zelda, you could go pretty much anywhere you wanted. You could wander around, you could experiment, you could fail, get killed dozens of times, and just keep trying over again. That was also the benefit of saving your games. You could save it at a safe place, and then try something crazy, and if you got killed, you just didn't go back that way. That theme that I played at the beginning of this segment, the one that plays at the beginning of Zelda, that was not the original theme song. It was originally a song called Bolero by a man named Maurice Ravel, and once the creators found out that that song was copyrighted, they had to create sort of a knockoff. Over the years, the original Zelda has repeatedly been recognized as one of the greatest games ever created. People of my age, around 50, if you were to make a list of your favorite games, the best games you ever played for any video game console, maybe you don't have Zelda at number 1 or even your top 5, but I'm pretty sure the vast majority of you would have it in your top 10. It was also inducted into the World Video Game Hall of Fame in 2016, which until I did this segment, I did not know that was a thing. I might end up doing a segment on that, even though the Hall of Fame there was created in 2015, so that kind of falls outside of my nostalgia timeline, I guess. Don't worry, I won't leave you in suspense. The list of the first inductees into the World Video Game Hall of Fame in 2015 include Doom, Pac-Man, Pong, Super Mario Bros., Tetris, and World of Warcraft. So there you go. I gave you those facts. Today, the original Legend of Zelda is the foundation of a franchise that continues to thrive across generations of Nintendo consoles. Like I said, there's more than 30 of these games. And I have no idea, there may be a dozen or more that are better, I guess, in gameplay and graphics than the original Zelda. But some of the more celebrated entries that came out after are ones like A Link to the Past, Ocarina of Time, Breath of the Wild. I hope you've enjoyed my look at Zelda with me sprinkling in music in there. If you've never played the original Legend of Zelda, first, I'm assuming you are under 30, and second, you need to go play it, period. I found a website called playclassic.games that has Legend of Zelda that you can play online. I have not played it yet. I do not know if it's legit. So if you can play it through more traditional, trusted ways, do that before you go to some rando site that says it has Zelda. The original game didn't just launch a series, it helped expand what was possible in video games, making them more interactive, giving them more narrative depth, giving you more of a choice as a player as to what you did. Even 40 years after its debut, fans still celebrate The Legend of Zelda, and it continues to inspire new developers, players, and creators in gaming and beyond. This week in history, we are going back 157 years to March 15th, 1869, and the formation of the very first professional baseball team, the Cincinnati Red Stockings. The Red Stockings trace their roots back to the Cincinnati Baseball Club, which was originally organized on July 23, 1866, in Cincinnati, Ohio. They originally began competing against other regional amateur teams, with the club electing officers and adopting rules under the umbrella of the National Association of Baseball Players, which was the sport's governing body at the time. The team had a distinctive uniform, white knickers paired with bright red stockings, pants and socks, and this earned them the nickname the Red Stockings. This was a novel style at a time when long trousers were standard. Some critics even called the Red Stockings uniforms immoral. Remember, this was back when a time when a woman showing her ankle was considered to be obscene. Over the next couple of seasons, the club grew stronger and more competitive. By 1868, they were among the top amateur teams in the NABBP. However, the strict amateur rules of the organization, which forbade paying players, limited talent acquisition. That began to change in late 1868 when the NABBP voted to allow openly professional teams for the 1869 season. This is where Cincinnati officials saw an opportunity to assemble the best team money could buy. On March 15, 1869, Cincinnati attorney Aaron B. Champion, yes, that was his real last name, president of the Cincinnati Baseball Club, hired Harry Wright, a former elite player, cricket enthusiast, and talent organizer, to put together and manage an all-professional team. Champion funded the venture, reportedly giving Wright around $10,000 to recruit talent. So consider that, $10,000 to be their salary cap. That's equal to just over $239,000 when adjusted for inflation to 2026. For comparison, the highest payroll in Major League Baseball in 2026 is the Los Angeles Dodgers at $401 million. Harry Wright constructed a roster of 10 salaried players, which ran from March 15th to November 15th, so like a one-year contract. Key figures on that roster included Harry Wright, who was manager and center fielder, George Wright, Harry's younger brother, who was shortstop, considered the best player on the team, Cal McVeigh, Charlie Gould, Fred Waterman, Asa Branard. These were some of the bigger names from the time that were on the team. And the money sure paid off for them. The newly professional Cincinnati Red Stockings launched their inaugural season on May 4th, 1869. In their first game, they won 45-9 over the Great Western Baseball Club of Cincinnati. That season, the Red Stockings compiled an astonishing record of 57-0. They went undefeated in a baseball season. And this was against other good teams around the country. Because previous teams played only locally or regionally, the Red Stockings went on a barnstorming tour of the U.S. They played teams in Cleveland, New York, Boston, Philly, Baltimore, D.C., even San Francisco. The Cincinnati Red Stockings 1869 Pro model was transformative for baseball. It normalized professionalism. It created more national interest in baseball. It created the influence of uniforms and branding, logos. It also shaped organized leagues because, interestingly, the Red Stockings disbanded their original professional roster after the 1870 season, mostly due to the fact that they couldn't pay all their players. What ended up happening was Harry Wright and several of their players took their talents to Boston and helped to form the Boston Red Stockings. And they would play in the National Association, which was the first professional baseball league. So for all of us that live in New England, Massachusetts, these Cincinnati Red Stockings ended up kind of turning into the Boston Red Sox. At least in the way where their manager and some of their best players came to form the Boston Red Stockings. So we owe a debt of gratitude to the Cincinnati Red Stockings, who became the very first professional baseball team 157 years ago, this week in history. Oh, I made sure to button up my knickers and have my stockings on as we launch a new time capsule. We're going back 36 years ago to March 15th, 1990. I chose this year because it was the last year that the Cincinnati Reds, the long after spiritual successor to the Red Stockings, won their last World Series. What was going on in the world of pop culture back then? Well, let's find out. The number one song was Escapade by Janet Jackson. This was off of her hugely successful Rhythm Nation 1814 album. This song was the third of 7 top 5 singles released from that album. Escapade was number one for 3 weeks. It helped Rhythm Nation 1814 sell more than 14 million copies worldwide. In her career, Janet Jackson has sold more than 100 million albums worldwide, and she has had 10 number one songs. The number one movie was The Hunt for Red October, and you could get into the theater with a ticket costing $4.22. This is a spy thriller based on the Tom Clancy novel starring Sean Connery about a Soviet sub-captain abandoning his orders and heading for the east coast of the United States. The movie was a massive hit, making more than $200 million on a budget of $30 million. It was nominated for 3 Academy Awards, winning for Best Sound Effects Editing, and it is 88% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes if you needed that final push to get you to go watch The Hunt for Red October. The number one TV show was The Cosby Show. I think it wasn't too many weeks ago on the show that I had The Cosby Show in the time capsule again. I'll have to do a top 5 at some point on the podcast when I've had enough episodes. Top 5 shows mentioned the most in the time capsule. I mean, it's basically Cosby Show, ER, All in the Family. There, I've already spoiled that segment. This is the all-time classic show, quintessentially 80s, even though this is 1990, about the Huxtable family living in Brooklyn. Sitcom with some drama and more serious topics covered at times. It was on for 8 seasons and 201 episodes between 1984 and 1992, and also spawned the successful spin-off A Different World. And if you were around back then, March 15th, 1990, maybe you were getting excited for the upcoming baseball season. You're looking around, maybe at Ticketmaster, to get your opening day tickets to your favorite team. Well, you're in luck. The average ticket price for opening day in 1990 was $9.50. That's about $23.64 when adjusted for inflation to 2026. And we locals here, if you were curious, the opening day tickets on average for the Boston Red Sox were more expensive than the average at $10.30, or about $25.63, which is understandable for them to be more expensive than the average. You know, they came off this incredible 83-79 season. And if you were wondering, and I'm sure you were, the average opening day ticket price in 2025 for MLB was $105. So roughly 4 times as much as they should be when based on inflation. And they wonder why they have attendance problems in some of these stadiums. But that wraps up the time capsule. That wraps up This Week in History. Speaking of stadiums that needed to be filled with people, we've got a brand new top 5. We're going to look at the most unique, weird, old Major League Baseball parks. Even if you don't like baseball, you're going to enjoy this segment. I found some really weird ones we've got to talk about now. I am lucky, I've said it many times, to grow up when I did, where I did. Living on Cape Cod means that I am, hour and a half at most away from Boston, one of the most legendary parks in the history of baseball, Fenway. I'm sure a lot of you that are listening from around the country that are my age, maybe a little older, remember going to your local Major League team's stadium and it just feeling special. Like a lot of the new stadiums in the last 20 plus years, they're all sterile, cookie cutter. None of them really have personality. And I was thinking with the Major League Baseball season starting, spring training's going on, and I was thinking, being the old man now, about how much cooler baseball parks were when I was a kid. Even the names, they're all garbage, like sponsored company names. Like, who the hell wants that? I want Fenway, I want Wrigley Field, Comiskey Park, Candlestick Park. I don't want Chase Field, Progressive Field, or crap like T-Mobile Park, Lone Depot Park. Ugh. So what we're going to do for this top 5, we're not going to look at the best names of fields. What I decided was to make it more inclusive and fun was to look at unique and weird old Major League Baseball parks. I had to find ones that had unique features about them. I will say that with the top 5 and 5 honorable mentions, there are 2 that are still around that you can visit, but the vast majority are gone, and you'll probably see why. A lot of these, when I was researching them, my first reaction when I saw some of the unique details was just why. As with most of these top 5 lists, they are in no particular order. Like I said, there are some honorable mentions. So let the head shaking begin as we start with the honorable mentions for unique, weird, old Major League Baseball parks. The first honorable mention is the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum. This is unique because it was basically a football stadium that they made a baseball diamond into. So there'd be the 100-yard field of grass, and then there was just this dirt diamond. It is still around to this day. It is mainly used as the home for the USC Trojans college football team. Another honorable mention, you heard me say it, is Fenway Park. One of the last bastions of old baseball. But it is known for the Green Monster, a 36-foot tall green wall in left field. For years it had a net on top of it. Now it has seats on top of it that are probably the most coveted of those going to see Red Sox games. You can still go to Fenway and see the Red Sox. Their average ticket price is somewhere between $140 and $175, but they should be pretty good this year. We'll see how well that take ages in October. Until then, we'll move on. Another honorable mention is another field that's still open, Wrigley Field in Chicago. Brick walls and ivy, that's all you really need to know about what makes Wrigley so unique. Wrigley Field has the rule that if the ball gets stuck in the ivy, it is an automatic ground rule double, meaning you go to second base. Another honorable mention is Colt Stadium. This was from the 60s. It was home to the Houston Colt 45s, who would later become the Houston Astros. It is weird and unique due to the hot and humid weather on the field that attracted swarms of mosquitoes. So pretty much everybody that played there had to deal with just getting attacked with mosquitoes all the time, in addition to playing baseball. And the final honorable mention is Tigers Stadium. This was in Detroit, obviously for the Tigers. This had a few unique features, including an overhanging right field upper deck, which stuck out like 10 to 15 feet over the field, so it would turn normally pop flies into home runs. So those are the honorable mentions. Have you been to any of those old MLB parks? I mean, Fenway and Wrigley are still around, and Tiger Stadium was around until a little over 20 years ago. Oh, but get ready. The real weirdness starts with the actual top 5, and we're going to start with number 1, Griffith Stadium. This one is insanity. This was in Washington, D.C., It was home to the Washington Senators. It was around from 1911 to 1965. What makes it truly unique is the weird shape of the outfield wall. You know, the walls can have different distances from home plate, but Griffith Stadium had this weird right angle that would jut in right around left center field. And that is because when they were buying the land to construct the park, there were a few people that refused to sell their homes. So the developers just built the field and moved the wall in around their property. Just imagine that happening today. Rather than trying to find another place to build your stadium, you just build it anyway and make it a weird shape. I couldn't find if the people that owned those houses could climb on their roofs and see the games. The last game was played there in 1961 for a whopping 1,500 fans, with Griffith Stadium being torn down in 1965. Number 2 is the Metrodome. A lot of people my age will probably remember this from Minneapolis. The Hubert H. Humphrey Metrodome was around from 1982 to 2014. It was domed, but it was an air-supported roof. This led to problems with it collapsing under the weight of heavy snow multiple times during its existence. The most famous of which was in 2010, when the stadium was still being used by the Minnesota Vikings football team, and it was captured on video, the roof tearing and snow just pouring in on the field. There were also weird quirks when it comes to these domed stadiums. A home run was hit by Dave Kingman in 1984 that flew into a drainage pipe in the ceiling and was never seen again. It's like the same stupid stuff that used to be in Tropicana Field in Tampa Bay, where if you hit it over a catwalk in the stadium, it would be a home run. The Metrodome was ultimately demolished in 2014. Number 3 is the Baker Bowl. The Baker Bowl was considered the first modern baseball park, built in 1887 and used for decades by the Philadelphia Phillies. It was originally made of wood, burned to the ground after 8 years, then was rebuilt out of brick. The weird thing about the Baker Bowl was that it was only 279 feet from home plate to the right field stands. So rather than allow people to hit loads of home runs, they built a 40-foot wall, bigger than the Green Monster out there. This gave the stadium the cigar box or bandbox type nickname, where home runs were easy to hit. There was also a 40-foot high, 5-foot wide embankment in center field that covered up a railroad tunnel that ran underneath the field. Eventually, the 40-foot wall in right field was increased to 60 feet tall. I guess it didn't stop as many home runs as they'd hoped. The Phillies moved out in the 1930s, so who knows if they had kept playing there. Maybe the wall would have been 1,000 feet tall eventually. The Baker Bowl was demolished in 1950. Number 4 is Municipal Stadium. This was in Cleveland, Ohio. It was used from 1931 to 1995 by the Cleveland Indians. The stadium was nicknamed the Mistake by the Lake, being on Lake Erie, so it was prone to odd weather coming off of the lakes, like lake effect snow. The main thing I found that made this stadium weird was Cleveland owner Bill Veeck installed portable temporary fences to change the dimensions of the field depending on the pitchers that were pitching. Just imagine that in any other sport. If depending on who you played in basketball, you change the hoop from 10 feet to 11 feet or 9 feet, or change the football field from 100 yards to 70 yards. And this was allowed for years, giving Cleveland an unfair advantage that didn't result in any World Series. Because Municipal Stadium was mainly for football, without the movable fences, the dimensions would be as far as 473 feet to the left and right field corners. Eventually, portable fences were outlawed and the stadium was made more baseball friendly. The stadium was demolished in 1996. And finally, number 5 on the list of the most unique / weird old Major League Baseball parks is the Polo Grounds. This was the original New York-based baseball field used mainly by the New York Giants. It was called the Polo Grounds because people used to play polo nearby. This was known for really short foul poles in right and left field, around 270, 250 feet, but deep center field that could be as far as 505 feet. This led to there being many inside the park home runs. It was also the first field to have the bullpens on the field, so pitchers warming up were in the line of fire of foul balls. The Polo Grounds was destroyed in 1964 after the New York Mets team moved to Shea Stadium. So there you have it. Unique old Major League Baseball parks. It's amazing to think with all these cookie cutter and just sterilized stadiums now that there were these fields that had just such weird dimensions, or houses that cut into the walls, or railroad tunnels that ran underneath them. But you can still go to Fenway and go to Wrigley, and the Major League season starts in just a few weeks, another great sign of spring starting. If I had to venture a guess, I would say that many of you, not most, but many, began your employment careers in one of two places. You either started as a server, dishwasher in a restaurant, or you started somewhere in the supermarket industry. It's just typically a rite of passage for teenagers to start with a job that's kind of low risk, low responsibility. In the supermarket, that's true. In the restaurants, if you're a server, bus person, dishwasher, it's a little more high stakes. I'm saying this because I did both. Obviously, you know I've had many restaurant story time segments on this podcast. And way back in episode 78, I did a segment about my beginnings in working. I bring that up because this week on the podcast, we're going to be looking back at an employee training video that really spoke to me. So venture with me, won't you please, back to the bygone year of 1992 as we learn about what it was like to work at the A&P Supermarket in a video that is called Think to Prevent Shrink. The video starts off, as you would expect all videos from this era to start off, with some quintessentially 90s, in-house made kind of techno-ish music. And this music is interspersed with scenes around the A&P Supermarket, some dude sitting in the back, smoking, someone ringing up products and not knowing the price, so just putting in whatever, a busted cart in the parking lot. It's really dated when you see some woman that has a denim coat and she's sticking a carton of cigarettes in it. It's like, welcome to the 90s. Then we get the host of this video in a gray suit and tie, and he starts off saying that this segment is about loss prevention, meaning that this 20-ish minute long video is part of a longer one, which I'd love to see the rest of it. He stands in front of what has to be a green screen showing an A&P because he doesn't interact with anything behind him. But he goes into everything that can contribute to loss and loss of merchandise. There's things like mishandling of merchandise, damaging things when you open it, internal theft, and he's giving you the amount of money that you would lose. And it's not a lot when considering today in 2026, but in 1992, it's a lot. This is where we get a callback to what must have been earlier in the orientation videos, when you find out it's less than a penny on the dollar is the profit that supermarkets make. Like trying to make you feel bad for how much they charge for everything.
So welcome aboard our loss prevention team. And just remember, to think to prevent shrink.
Then we get the cool graphics with the music playing, where you see the word shrink, and then the circle with a line goes through it, and then it changes to think. Like, this was big-time computer animation in 1992. When he comes back, it's like someone must have told this narrator guy to, like, look happier, because he comes back out and he goes from being menacing to, like, super happy standing in the produce section. We then start the process of getting a tour through the typical A&P, teaching you how you can prevent shrink, as they always call it. It's a lot of common sense stuff. Pick up things that are on the floor, straighten up the shelves. When you open up boxes, make sure you do it safe with the box cutter. One unexpected benefit of this video is getting to see all the old products and logos on the shelves as they have scenes going on. So they show you the old cereals and sodas. It's like extra Easter eggs for you when you're watching it. For example, they have a pricing gun on a display of mini Oreos, which I think they still have, but they're like in individual bags, like for kids to bring to school. This looks more like the regular boxes that Oreos would come in. There are a few things that are definitely signs of the time. The pricing gun. They tell you don't leave it unattended because customers could change the price on things. They tell you not to put the prices on removable lids. And they show some guy taking what looks like a can of frosting with a red top and then putting a blue top on it, like you wouldn't notice if you were ringing it up. Now we move on to the dairy section. It's basic, again, common sense. Make sure that nothing's leaking or expired. Rotate the product. Make sure all the doors are closed. They show the rotation process, and I don't know if I'm the only one, but if I go to a supermarket and I'm looking for something that's perishable or something with an expiration date, milk, bread, just because the one that will expire first is in the front doesn't mean that's the one I reach for. I'm sure I can't be the only one that reaches over to grab newer milk and bread. One thing I notice, and you'll notice if you watch this video, is for some reason, this dude that's the host cannot say refrigerated. He constantly says refrigerated.
Also, be alert to return any misplaced refrigerated items to their proper spot in the display case.
The first time I watched this, I've watched this video 3 times. The first time I thought it was my ears. The second time I thought maybe I took an edible, but I didn't. It's just this guy can't say the word refrigerated.
Alert the manager in charge should you think that any refrigeration or freezer unit is operating improperly.
See, am I crazy? Well, yes, but not there. Then we get into one of the parts that I definitely fondly remembered when I worked in supermarkets, and that's in the back stock room. I also think when they have this guy, I know he's in front of a green screen, but it's like they added in a bit of an echo effect with him in the back stock room, like to make you believe that he's really there when you can kind of see the outline. You know when it's a green screen, especially in the early 90s. They have scenes showing a guy keeping the back stock room neat and clean, throwing boxes in the baler to crush them. I used to like using that. But then the guy says, make sure you control all vendors and salespeople. The guy says, keep them inside the marked lines. It's your area. Protect it.
Control all salespeople and vendors in the backroom areas. Limit their access to your store's designated vendor staging area, the marked area of the receiving floor. Remember, it's your area. Protect it.
They show a vendor like trying to give this guy like free chips. Like, you can't accept free products. It's going to make you look bad. The best is when there's some stranger walks in. He's all in blue. And it looks like he has some cheapo headphones, but he just looks greasy, slick back hair with glasses and a dirt mustache and goatee. He's just standing there and they show the employee like throwing him out. As they're going through the back stockroom and showing, damaged merchandise and don't throw it away without showing your supervisor, we get another product that I know isn't around anymore. Kellogg's Kenmay Rice Bran. It was a cereal that was only out for a couple of years in the early 90s. And it just happens to be front and center in this A&P video. The irony was when I was watching this video, I got to this point, paused it, looked up Kenmay Rice Bran, and seeing that it was something that was only briefly around, went into my notes for future podcasts and put that cereal in Forgotten 90s cereals. So if in the future I do a segment on Forgotten 90s cereals and I have Kenmay Rice Bran, you have the A&P training video to thank for it. What I appreciate about this video, or at least A&P, when they show people cleaning up, they talk about sanitation and keeping things clean like in the deli. And when they're slicing meats, they're actually wearing gloves. Back in episode 222, I did a review of a Subway employee training video from 1993. And in that, they were slicing meats for sandwiches and making sandwiches without gloves. So obviously I noticed the difference. The guy talks about proper display of salads, like this is in the a la carte section, salad bar. They show seafood, it should be kept moist and set up in the right display, which I guess means laying pieces of lettuce around it, like that makes it more appealing. Like, well, I was gonna buy that swordfish steak, but it didn't have a piece of lettuce near it, so now I don't want it. Then we get to the produce department, and this is one I think the guy was actually in a store because you can see his shadows against the different vegetables. It's like, I don't know what the budget was for this. It's like they only had enough budget for him to be in a store for like half the scenes and then green screen the rest of it. They show salad bars and they say if your store has one, here's how to keep it neat and clean. I saw a stat that by 1990, 90% of supermarkets had a salad bar. I don't remember seeing one in A&P. Obviously, the last time I went to an A&P was over 25 years ago, but I always remember Stop and Shop having them. And that's a question. Anyone that worked at an A&P, do you remember if it had a salad bar? This is the kind of information I'll remember, but yet someday I'll forget how to drive, but I'll know how many salad bars were in an A&P in the 90s. Finally, we get to the front end. They're showing you how to properly ring up merchandise. I guess even here in 1992, not every supermarket had an automatic ringer where you could scan the barcode. It's the common things you would think. Check the bottom of carts. People put waters or sodas or dog food under there. And there's also the tricks like remove the circular from the carriage just in case they stuck merchandise under it or under their coats that are in their cart. One thing I didn't know is, I guess according to A&P, you couldn't ring up friends or family because they feared you would just let them walk out with stuff. I don't know, any of you that worked in supermarkets or anyone in general, if you had a friend or family member come to your register, would you cheat your job to give them deals on stuff? I don't know. It gets to a point here where you get to see the front end manager talking to one of the cashiers, and she's got classic 90s hair. Close to 16 minutes into this video, the guy is doing like a monologue about how to count money properly, and then there's a glitch in the video.
In the meantime, however, your alertness to certain situations and a little bit of common sense can help your store and your team a great deal more than you might imagine.
I don't know if that's from the upload to YouTube or if that's how the video is, so people are watching that getting trained and they're like, what did he just say? It was probably the most important thing he would say in the video and it got ruined. Ooh, but then we get into the serious stuff, shoplifting. They show some shady guy with his receding hairline and it looks like a members-only jacket or a windbreaker changing the prices on steaks. And the narrator says, "Don't approach him. Go tell your manager." You get the scary music for shoplifting. And then the narrator says the best way to prevent shoplifting is giving good customer service. No. If someone's going to go in and shoplift just because you're friendly doesn't mean they're going to stop. They might really need that 3-liter bottle of soda they'll stick into their winter coat they wear in the middle of summer. Then we get more serious stuff with internal theft. Employees stealing. They show some guy saying it's time for lunch, and these two guys are going on break, and one of them says we should just take this bag of chips and just have it. The dude's got a typical, really weak mullet from the 90s. What he grabbed are Boise's chips, so yet another product that doesn't exist anymore. These were ones they were kind of like the predecessor to the popped chips that are out now. But of course the other employee says, no, we can't steal chips to have with our lunch. The narrator really puts the threats in there, saying that as soon as you know about potential theft, you're involved, so you better say something. Your reputation is at stake. We get to the end of the video, wrapping up with happy music and kind of reviewing everything they were talking about, especially smoking only in designated areas.
As with any aspect of your job, don't hesitate to ask your manager or other members of the management team to assist you with any loss prevention effort.
It ends with the narrator doing the typical rah-rah stuff to make you feel like your job is the most important, that you're super needed, like they wouldn't just replace you in a heartbeat. But it always comes back down to think to prevent shrink. There's all the different scenes you have seen in the past 20 minutes of the video, and the happy music as it ends. We then find out at the very end that the A&P where they filmed all the scenes was in Killingly, Connecticut. That's actually located not too far from the Rhode Island border. I just looked it up. Sadly, that A&P closed in 2006, so you can't go and visit it. The actual building was demolished, and now it's a Kohl's. In case you live in the area and you're wondering where this video was shot. They don't tell you anybody that's in the video. I'm sure they're all just regular employees, but they don't even tell you who the narrator was. It just says, produced by the A&P training department. I'm sure if I really wanted to, I could probably go onto LinkedIn and find somebody that worked on this video. But there you go. That's a little bit of what it would have been like to work at A&P in 1992. I would have been 15 years old. By that point, I had already worked stocking shelves in a small general store. I had done landscaping, and I was getting ready to work in dishwashing. And don't worry, I've got plenty more employee training videos to come for more slices of life and employment in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. But of course, until next week, that will wrap up episode 236 of the In My Footsteps podcast. Spring is here. Thank you for making it to the end of this show, your weekly dose of Gen X nostalgia. Hopefully you've gotten to enjoy being outside. Maybe you're out walking right now. The weather, hopefully it's good enough for you. Don't worry, my fellow Cape Codders and New Englanders. It'll be spring in about a month. The podcast train doesn't stop rolling, though. Next week will be episode 237. We're going to look back at the story behind the We Are the World song and the album that went with it. We're going to do a deep dive into the 80s icon known as Max Headroom. And we'll look back at the top 5 biggest sports stars of the 1970s. So all that is coming up next week on episode 237 of the podcast. If you've enjoyed this show, if you enjoy my content, like I said, you can support me on Patreon for $5 a month. You can buy me a coffee. Links to both are in the podcast notes. You can also share my content, share the show, share my blogs, the Initial Impressions 2.0 blog. Follow me on Instagram, on Threads. I've got so many videos and photos up there. I just passed 6,000 posts on Instagram. I'm hoping in the next week or so to have some official concrete news on the finished product of the When Henry Met Henry short film. It has taken way, way too long for it to be edited, but that's out of mine and Frank's hands. Our hope, we believe, is that it's going to be done before the end of the month, in time for us to enter it in a local film festival. Once that's done, I'm going to likely have it on my YouTube channel for all to see. And another thing I want to do is start making it a part of my author events that I do at local libraries and other places, where I'll talk about Cape Cod history and then segue into the When Henry Met Henry film, which is 10 minutes. Then have Q&A. That is my hope. Probably later in the summer into the fall. Also, be on the lookout on my YouTube channel. I have a few of my friend producer Frank Durant's old films that have gone up there. There was an issue with the original person that had them on their YouTube channel. I won't go into details, but Frank asked me to get them and put them on my channel. So if all you know of Frank is Lady of the Dunes documentary and now When Henry Met Henry, at least hearing me talk about it and his interviews on the podcast, you can check out a few of his older films. I'm sure in the next few months I will probably have another interview with Frank. Maybe it'll be a YouTube one where we just talk about the When Henry Met Henry process. I did a video with me talking about it, but it'll be more fun since Frank's the one that came up with the film itself and wrote the script. Happy birthday this week coming up to my cousin Patrick out in Las Vegas. He's more than my cousin. He's more like a brother to me. He's closer than my own brother to me. It's funny. I always say I wish he was on Cape Cod, but the thing is, he grew up. He was born in Vegas, grew up in Vegas. So when he moved back to Vegas many years ago, it's like I had to stop and realize, like, oh yeah, this wasn't his home. Who knows? Someday I might be visiting him back out in Vegas. It's been a long time. Vegas Part 2, except this time with a lot less gambling losses on my part. So happy birthday to Patrick. Hopefully I will see you again someday sooner than later. And before my caffeine high wears off, I will wrap this podcast up the way that I always do. This final phrase that I always say, I don't think I ever intended it to be like my sign-off. And I don't have it written down anywhere. I've just said it 200-something times. It's just in my head now. But it definitely sums up my views on the world, my views on life in general. When I say, remember, in this life, don't walk in anyone else's footsteps, create your own path, and enjoy every moment you can on this journey we call life, because you never know what tomorrow brings. And that's the truth. Thank you all again for tuning into episode 236. This has been the In My Footsteps podcast. I am Christopher Setterlin. You already knew that. And I'll talk to you all again soon.